is mentioned at the very end of the book, it has to do with three or four different ways to view religion or faith, right? And it might even not even have made into the version that you saw. One is you're a believer in this or that religion in the traditional sense. You follow the scriptures. You have, I guess you could say, a pre-modern relationship to your religion. You might still be a modern person, then you compartmentalize your religious life and say, well, miracles are real in the Christian sense, right? Or in the Buddhist sense, or whatever is your thing. You can thereafter have a skeptical view or a secular view, I suppose. So you're either an atheist or agnostic, but an agnostic to the point that you're practically an atheist, right? So then you simply don't believe it, and you say, well, all of those things are not real. And as you and I would probably agree, I think the atheists and agnostics of our time, or maybe of other times as well, I'm not sure, they miss something, right? They think that the religions are they just look at them at a surface level, and they're like, so you're saying this guy started living again after 3 days, right? That seems unlikely. And well, why are you all believing this and not checking the facts, or just checking if it makes any sense at all? They tend to miss that there are very real spiritual experiences. So whether or not those claims, that traditional believers are empirically true, there can still be parts inside of you or qualities of experience or insights or ways of relating that you just lock down and just become blind to, right? But then that are nevertheless continued within those religious traditions, that you just don't see the value of those things, right? And the value of those things can be so immense that they are more meaningful even than stuff like the love for your own family or anything you give your life for, stuff like that, right? Even without the particular beliefs, right? So then there's a third position, which is the most common in our circles, and it's the traditions are depositories of truths, but they are depositories of transrational truths, so that they're allegorical, but not in the superficial sense. Oh, this is an allegory for this age-old wisdom. They're allegorical in a very profound archetypal sense. That if you and they have gone through a certain sort of evolution that goes deep into the mind or psyche of human beings, and particularly in their mystical forms or their mystical traditions, the religions can and do have transformative effects, which is also, by the way, observable in some few cases of, let's say, Tibetan monks and so forth, and under a brain scanner, that you can see that these people may, after tens of thousands of hours under intense practice within an intensely held belief system that most other people probably wouldn't buy, nevertheless have transformed their minds to be in almost perpetual happiness and forgiveness and bliss, right? And they prolong then the subjectivity of their lifespan, so they actually in practice have much longer lives. They also perceive greater granularity and beauty of every moment, so their phenomenology is richer and so forth, right? So there are transrational truths, and you can even look at them empirically and see, yeah, they are there, right? Now, A fourth position would be the religions are not necessarily true transrationally either. They're full of transrational truth claims, relative transrational truths, right? And those transrational truths can be improved upon and can be updated. And religion has evolved over the millennia and over hundreds of years. So it is within our right, to try to evolve religious thinking or existential thinking, right? Or evolve theologies to be more in accordance with our day and age. In this particular book, there's an attempt to evolve some Christian thinking that traditional Christian thinking is God came to the world and forgave our sins through his suffering, right? Whereas a more secular view, which maybe captures a deeper existential truth, is that God created the world in some metaphorical or literal sense, whether or not you're a believer. But God created an imperfect world with lots of things that aren't so good, and you have to forgive the world. You have to forgive God. So you take the power of forgiveness back from God, and you put it where it belongs in you, and God is a perfect being, perhaps, but still needs to be forgiven for us to be able to see their perfection, right? So to a conventional secular person, that doesn't sound very secular, but it doesn't actually mean you have to believe in God, because whether or not in the conventional sense or a Christian sense or a Muslim sense, it just means, well, Stephen Fry, for instance, this British comedian, writer, or public persona, he was asked once by a religious person, and this is a clip they can find online, right, where they say, well, what if you die and then you get to purgate? What would you say? And he would say, how dare you? And he starts listing, bad things he would, scold God for, because obviously God can't be so good if he created, tropical worms that go and shine inside the eyes of a little child, or horrible things like that. So what you get is that Stephen Fry hasn't forgiven God, whether or not they exist as a creator entity or not, right? Because even if you scratch out the creator entity, you're mad at reality for containing, in this case, tropical worms that go and eat the eyes of children and killing them, right, in the most painful, horrific manners. And who wouldn't be mad at that, right? And if you're completely honest, you're not entirely so mad about those things. You're entirely mad about the things that happen to you more particularly, and the people you really care about. And maybe if you had personal experience with that, you can be really, really mad about that. But usually it gets a lot more personal when you're really, really mad at if you're entirely honest about it, right? So I think that we can, in our day and age, progress to a sort of sincerely, ironically held religion. Now, very few people agree with me here. All the religious people and spiritual people say, you're not being sincere. Like, I want real belief, like a real fullness, right? And the secular people say, oh, you're being religious. I'm not buying your bullshit. Why not just, say there's no religion, there's no God, they're just facts and science. Be done with it, right? So very, very, very few people like this position. Now, in the book, there is an argument from in Hansi's third chapter, the Live by Sincere Irony. There's an argument that the correct view is a superposition of these two seemingly incommensurable sides, right? And that in fact, the greater rigor with which you hold one, the more sincerity it opens up in the other, right? And that transrational truths or spiritual experience brings you closer to the truth, not farther away from it, right? So that's a sort of the update on the spiritual traditions, that we're adding a sort of ruthless cynicism and skepticism towards any empirical truth claims, but not only that, towards the transrational truth claims themselves. That they are also relative and they also evolve, which, I mean, any study of the history of religion will reveal that. The Tibetan Buddhism didn't just come out of nowhere. It came out of a very long and arduous circle of step-by-step progression under very specific circumstances and combination of different cultures, right? And religious practices. That could produce the wisdom we today know as Dzogchen and all of those exceedingly advanced practices, right? They didn't just come out of nowhere. And they're one of the greatest achievements of humanity, or so would most transrationally inclined people agree. And if you scan my brain, it's not going to be like one of the Tibetan masters. It's not going to be that. So what we have is I suppose, again, an attempt at a marriage of East and West. This has been said by many others, but in the East, they never quite developed what we today know as psychotherapy and psychology. These are particularly Western additions to the traditions. And to get sanity in sublime mediocrity in our day and age, you really need that side, that sort of grounding in that more commonsensical, psychological Western side for the spirituality part to bloom. And if we don't have that, I mean, the risk of cult stuff or abuse stuff and so forth increases, of course. So, I mean, it's a long answer, I know, and it's a fairly complicated answer. But there is something that makes people such as myself not just dive in and buy one of the packages that are offered, right? Why don't I just become Christian or become a Buddhist or become Muslim? Because something in it just says, no, this doesn't work for me, right? So you need to reformulate the rules we play religion by, by which the generative conditions of our religious varieties of religious experience, right? And this we can do, right? The book is not, on the surface level, a book on theology. But if you scratch the surface, you go through this portal of death, you see that, yes, it is a book about really wrestling issues of faith in our time, basically, of faith, of piety. How can these things be reinvented in everyday life, in broad daylight, right? Not as something mysterious over there, right? Or far away.
Yeah, what was coming up when you were speaking about like having this kind of cynicism or doubt, there was this quote, it was like, the greater the doubt, the greater the awakening. So it's like they're somehow related, and that's almost like the process with Zen koans. It's like you get to this point where you just run doubt like to the fullest extent, like you just keep going till like you break through it. And I kind of have a side note. I'm curious if you've ever heard of Daniel Ingram.
I have heard of him. I didn't read his books though. No.
Yeah, I had him on the first episode on my podcast. His book is awesome, and they've had him in scanners and everything, and the guy can literally shut off his default mode network like on demand. And he claims that he's like a fully enlightened being in the Theravada Buddhist tradition. But it was just interesting because you were talking about Tibetan monks that get put in these scanners and all that. But he's like a Westerner and like a physician, and he's actually done in super intense meditation. And I just think he's a amazing example of what could be possible in human
It was
transformation.
actually on my reading list. Actually, I've been listening to another young meditation teacher from the UK, and he references Daniel Ingram. I thought, okay, now is the time. So it's funny you bring it up. Yeah,
Yeah, that book really like opened me up to a lot of other spiritual teachers, and like really like like going deep into the meditation world beyond let me calm my mind, let me just feel a little bit better, but like actually like awakening being a real thing, and like actually like this kind of deep transformation that goes beyond let me just calm my mind for 20 minutes. So yeah, highly recommend it. Just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, like I also wanted to speak about, because a lot of what you're saying, this notion of the headless God, and then maybe also you could kind of speak about the difference you see between religion and spirituality, or if there isn't a difference, or like what the integration is, because Hansi speaks a little bit about that in this book as well.
yeah, yeah. So let's start with the last part. The difference between spirituality and religion. So the spirituality part, or no, sorry, the religion part is directly, or the definition used in Hansi's book is directly from
William James, is that the one?
from William James, exactly. So it's how you relate to the totality of experience, right? So there is some sort of relatedness, some sort of sense or feel you have, like, what is this whole thing? It's not so far away from ontology, right? Ontology, what is really real? But ontology comes down to like your thoughts about it, right? But religion is even beyond your thoughts about it. It's like your sense of this whole thing, right? And I think that's the best definition. It's much better than you get a dictionary definition. It's going to say, well, it contains something metaphysical, belief in other worlds, or belief in gods, and certain rituals tied to that. It doesn't actually say what it is, right? With William James's definition, it's clear that human beings, per definition, are sort of religious, and there's a sort of integration of the fundamental paradigms that shape how we think. From there on, certain models of predictive models or causative models of how we think about the world. From there on, all the narratives that we have about all the things, and from there on, all the experiences that these narratives try to give order to, or put in place, right? Put into, make comprehensible, basically. So it's not just an onslaught of crazy color flashes and sounds to us. So that's religion, the highest principle of how everything connects to us, right? And spirituality, this is, and not from William James, it's Hansi's own definition from the Listening Society former book. But spirituality, if there is a scale of subjective states, there is 13 rungs on the scale. The low states are things that are hell-like or absolutely awful in an unreal manner. The medium states are pretty much where 99% of your life happens, where you're either happy or sad, but things are within the scope of the normal world. And above that, you have something you might call spiritual experiences. So very refined experiences that often contain strokes of insight, bliss, sense of vast openness, deep connection, extreme fullness of experience, extreme overflowing love, compassion, all of these things all these things have to do with the higher states. And spirituality, in this definition, is that which pertains to or includes in its worldview the higher states. So you might say you have a spiritual experience. You mean you are in the higher states, the higher subjective states, the inner states, right? Or you might say, I'm interested in spirituality. You mean you're interested in the practices and scaffolds and situations that you feel are likely to bring you to those higher states, right? Or you say, I think spirituality can change the world. You then mean that, if people act from these higher states of high motivation, overflowing with love and joy, they're more likely to do good things, for instance. Or that spiritual experiences can heal you. You mean that states, being in those high states, can change how the medium states play out later on in your life, because something radically can change in you during those high states. I am changed. That's a common language in religion, right? Now, higher states aren't always good per definition. You can come close to a religious teacher. They can be good at putting you in higher states. You can have a spiritual experience, get your mind very suggestible and open up a lot. And then you assume, this person must be some mouthpiece of God or whatever. But maybe they were just good at putting you in high states. And they end up fooling you and fucking your wife, as we sometimes say, right? So higher states aren't in and of themselves a guarantee of ethical value, but you might say, if you're a little bit of a utilitarian, you might say that the subjective states of real living beings is what truly matters. So it matters for humans and other sentient beings, animals, and whatever else might be sentient in this world, to approach the spiritual states and avoid the lower ones. And to the extent that the lower ones cannot be avoided, that they're wisely traversed so that they are overturned, right? So they can turn to higher states again, right? So spirituality is that which pertains to the higher states, right? And that's a very different thing than religion. So within the religions, you will tend to have practices that are spiritual, but most of the time, the religions just order your everyday life. It's not like if you're a Muslim, you go pray 5 times a day. It's not like you go in super deep love orgasm explosion trance 5 times a day. Usually not. What do I know, man? But for most people, the religion is just there ordering your everyday life, right? So there are a lot of people who will say that they're spiritual but not religious in our day, and that means that they mean that they're open to the spiritual experiences, but that they're not. But that they don't believe in, let's say, everywhere that says in the Bible, or that they don't affiliate with a certain church or mosque or something, right? Or synagogue or whatever, right? Stupa. And however, or Sangha. However, if you examine that common way we Westerners like to express ourselves, if we have this more expansive view of what religion is, and we have this more clear definition of spirituality is, two things become clear. First of all, that you can't actually be not religious, because you're going to have some relationship to the totality anyway. So you might have the religion of materialism, secular materialism, or a materialist reductionism, which is, not rational, and you can't prove it. It's just a sense that you have, or a relationship that you have towards everything, and and that feels real to you. And nevertheless, it involves leaps of faith and just basic suppositions about the nature of reality and your own place in it and everything, right? So it's a sort of religion. And so, first of all, you can't actually be and sometimes people say, I don't like ideological people. I just see things as they are. No, you don't. Of course, you're going to see them through your ideology, through your religion. The other part is, if you say you want to be spiritual, well, if spirituality means the highest states, and the states fluctuate in every sentient being, right? I mean, you get hit by a car, you're not, well, you might have near-death experience, and that might actually be a high state. But let's say something bad happens to you. You have nausea, or you just have a bad day. You're not going to have a spiritual experience at that point. Yeah, things are going to suck, and they're going to be ordinary and mundane and gray and devoid of beauty for some time, right? But so spirituality is going to leave you in that position, but religion is going to be with you every second of the time. What do you believe is the ethical way to do? What can you think about in terms to find meaning in your suffering? All of those things. So the religious part is going to be there 24/7, right? So that's why Hansi says. You need to be. I'm religious, not spiritual, right? because religion is that which is going to last on a really bad day. Spirituality comes and goes. Nobody's actually spiritual in every part of what they do every part of the day, right? There are certain spiritual aspects of what you might do, or stuff like that. So it's sort of a dead end, this spirituality without religion. If viewed from this perspective anyway, or with these definitions, if you define the words differently, obviously we can play another game with it.